No matter what anyone says, first impressions have, do, and will always leave a lasting impression, especially the bad ones. I mean, sure, you can always change them with enough effort and time, but it's hard to get players to like your game when the first few minutes feel so numb, distorted, and difficult to get to grips with. Presented for your approval, the Skylia Prophecy from developer ERMedia, available on Steam now for £11.39. A game that, on the face of it, is a tempting proposition. Cool pixel graphics, a decent soundtrack, multiple enemy types and powers to use, boss battles, a dozen levels of multi-layered world to traverse, and a story that sounds epic and gothic. But when a game's own release claims, quote, "The game is not unfair, but you have to pay attention," I am immediately concerned. Because a game's difficulty isn't just set by the enemies you face or the puzzles you have to solve. Apparently, the developer wanted to test the upper boundaries of your patience as well. Deep breaths, I am a big boy, and I shan't lose my temper over this f***ing thing. Welcome to my review of 2020's The Skylia Prophecy. The game's synopsis reads, explore a dangerous fantasy world in this epic quest for redemption inspired by the kill-the-player approach of the Souls games. And if you feel this type of game is too hard for you, you can make it easier by completing side quests and spending the money earned on items in shops. Our hero, Mirenia, is an 18-year-old girl on a quest for redemption. After unleashing an evil power when she was a teenager, she is now on her way to Turkin Fortress to perform an ancient spell that should help her vanquish the very evil she unleashed 3 years ago. Now, nearing the end of her quest, she arrives in the villages just outside the fortress where monsters ravage, young women are being raped and men are being slaughtered. Armed with her trusted shield blade, Mirenia is so close of undoing the mistakes of her past. Will she succeed, or ultimately only make matters worse? The game's story is told mainly through conversations and interactions with the NPCs and store owners of the world, and unfolds over the course of your progression of the game. You encounter NPCs in villages, in between levels, and sometimes the occasional NPC who may offer you aid, but for a price. Overall, the game's narratives are drip-fed to you in these mini-bites, and from what I gathered, everything is standard fantasy fare. But while I always appreciate a developer taking the time to build lore and a world, when a game is as hard and inherently frustrating as it is, it's hard to pay attention to who that guy is or what this thingamajig does when you're just trying your best not to die. And to be honest, so long as you pay attention to the quest points, you'll have a general gist of what each level is asking you to do, and these quest points are usually listed when the quest giver kind of reads it to you and says, hey, go do this thing, go collect this thing, this person needs help, etc. Moving on to the level design, the levels themselves are designed nicely with branching paths and verticality, as well as a depth of detail. I like the style and the artwork that went into the character designs, the animation, the sound design is crisp and clean, albeit I noticed a lot of glitches where certain assets did not want to load, such as enemies moving out of view behind things like door holes, and in some cases the conversation options won't change. You'll try to select them, but it won't move, meaning that I'd have to cancel out of the conversation and hope to God I didn't select something I later wanted to take back. The game has a mature content reading that's not for kids, and even the liberal use of the C-bomb in places, and the overall presentation is that of a mature, dark, oppressive world. And I really enjoyed these little details here and there. Would have liked to have seen more of the customized artwork, but nevertheless the pixel graphics do the job. Moving into the gameplay for a moment, I'd like it to be a bit sharper and a bit more responsive, but it's fine. Standard stuff and nothing spectacular. One melee attack, a jump button, a mana shield, sort of, and the use of powers and potions to help you navigate the levels and battle against the various enemies you'll encounter, who range from creepy crawly spiders and other crawly creatures, flying monsters, statues, and all manner of Gothic inspired foes. And they're everywhere. Walking through a level is to wander with such an awareness that any moment an enemy might drop, appear out of nowhere, burst out of the scenery, and when you first encounter them you have no idea how much damage they can take, and that's normally between 2 to 8 hits or mana blast, which, trust me, in this game is a lot when the combat mechanics or as clunky as they are. To help you in your journey, there are potions to replenish your health, mana, give you temporary invulnerability, a resurrection potion, general keys, master keys that allow you to access specific dungeons, and defeating enemies, while difficult and arduous, does give you experience points that boost your health, mana, and strength bars permanently, as well as boosts for these scattered in hidden areas of the levels. There are additional powers unlocked, typically by defeating a boss, and there are various markets and side characters that offer you their wares in exchange for gold that you earn by taking on and completing quests. All of this is generally pretty good, the foundation for a solid, if not moderately entertaining, 2D action platformer. But now, my friends, I must remember to check my famous temper, because let's talk about how much this game wants to tick you off in the name of terrible game design masquerading as difficulty. For starters, the combat is sometimes so frustrating. Your attack sensitivity and depth perception is sometimes so numb and so hard to gauge where your attacks will actually land, and yet your enemies need only the slightest touch to cut your health in half or kill you outright. And if your enemy has projectiles, prepare your butts for accuracy that would make even the most abusive of COD campers green with envy. Combine these two elements and it makes the bosses, who just soak up damage with no health bar to help you manage and moderate a battle, so difficult to complete. And sure, bosses are meant to test a player's mettle. Standard enemies, though, are so cheap! Bouncing projectile attacks that somehow find their way through your one-sided shield and fire so infrequently that you can never get a pattern beat on them. The shield is unlimited, I take that point, but it's only one plane and leaves you vulnerable on 3 fronts, and you are disproportionately hit from behind, and some attacks bypass it entirely, and it's hard to see which attacks will or won't be stopped at times. Enemies that duck out of nowhere to steal a bar from you here or there, and juggernauts that grin in the face of your attacks and just smash you if you get close, when all you really have is melee attacks at your disposal. So you think, stay further away. Great, they'll blast your ass from afar the second you don't try to get close. Oh, and if you're lucky, you catch a blast from the front, and then one that ricochets in from behind. Oh, and if you're super lucky, sometimes a crawling enemy, a floating enemy, and a juggernaut enemy will begin encroaching on you just as one of those bloody spiders hurtles towards you, sealing your fate. In fairness to the game, so long as you save though, enemies you kill do stay dead. So while it's hard, you are still incentivized to defeat everything in front of you, not only for experience that goes towards your health and your mana and your strength, which all permanently stay, you also have the peace of mind of knowing you don't have to deal with them again. Speaking of saving, now we come on to my second biggest issue of the game. When you die, and trust me, you'll die a lot in this game, you encounter another of what seems to be a laundry list of issues that the developer left in the sake of difficulty. There is no autosave, and there is only one save slot. What this means for a game that prides itself on difficulty and puzzles is that at multiple points in the game where there is no way to progress aside from quitting to the main menu and undoing all the progress you made up until that point, you have no other choice but to either try and remember the location of the very sporadically placed save statues, and even if you do, there's no fast travel. So unless you're brave, stupid, or both, you'll find yourself backtracking backwards through entire levels to save and avoid having to defeat 1 billion enemies over and over again. Or worse still, dying, losing all your progress. And that's if you're not forced to do that in the event you make the mistake of flicking the trigger, using up all your mana with no replacement potion, or indeed using some kind of consumable that then prohibits you from progressing in the level. But all these issues pale in comparison to my third and biggest gripe with the game, and it centers around the design, feel, and execution of the game itself. It's so needlessly hard to navigate around the thing, just to bloody play it. It's so unresponsive and lacking in any real interface beyond a flash on the title screen with regards to what buttons to press, and it has literally nothing in the menu you can amend about it. Be difficulty, sound, controller configuration, image quality, you name it. This game does not let you have the wheel even for a moment. Its control scheme and overall layout design are just terrible, meaning that beginning the game took me 20 to 30 minutes to just get past the tutorial. And that's not because I didn't beat the enemies or because I died, but just because pressing all the buttons didn't seem to do anything. And that's this game's biggest crime. When you design a game to be hard, as this game undoubtedly is, it's unacceptable to have controls this bad and UI so poor, because it creates a cycle of frustration, dying and rebirthing, and that frustration ruins this game. And I don't deny, beneath its crappy coating shell lies a creamy nougat centre that has a lot of promise. But it's a game of two halves, and unless you have a constitution that enables you to forgive all of this annoyance to begin with, you'll put this game down long before it gets good. Which is a shame, because it really does have a good game buried underneath an avalanche of arse biscuits here. Its artwork and the game's setting itself, which clearly had a lot of effort put into it. Just simple things like being able to see what the bloody buttons are. Simple things like being able to navigate the map without having to backtrack for an hour and a half. Simple things like just getting to the fun part of your game without punishing players for the temerity of trying to get to it. I really believe there's a good game in here somewhere, and if the developers could make navigation easier, both in its UI and in its world, tighten up that numb and kind of weird distant feeling of combat, give the mana shield an all-encompassing design but with a time limit, give bosses a health bar to make it easier to gauge the battle itself and to give it more of a sense of epicness, and patch some of those smaller glitches out, I'd be so tempted to rate this game highly given all it does right. But given the game actively punished me for 90 minutes solid before it started to become fun, and the following hours were a mesh of 2 steps forward and then 10 kicks to the dick, this is a game I do not recommend, given its price and quality, compared to literally dozens of other 2D action platformers that are available that have just as much lore, much more stable, easier to handle, and have better combat. Trust me, save your money, save your time, and stay far, far away. And with that, it's time to call my psychiatrist and order me something big and fluffy to rip to shreds. But before I do that, I want to say thank you for watching this edition of the Halcyon Show. I've been your host, Lon Risley. Please like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more reviews and videos in the future. And as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you on the next episode.